Yes, very good. All right,
All right.
Awesome.
we have a quorum now.
Okay,
Okay, you ready, Quorum?
all right, we're going to proceed with the January Finance Committee meeting for the Lehigh Northampton Airport Authority. You want to do a roll call?
Frank Falciano,
Present.
Paul Anthony, Robert Brooks,
Present.
John Hayes, Ron Heckman, Larry Hemberger,
Here.
Mike Stershek.
It's nice that he's on here.
Yeah,
All right,
we have a quorum.
we have a quorum. Thank you. Welcome, everybody. Is there any public comment?
No, sir.
No public comment, so the action items, we are looking to approve the meeting minutes from the November meeting. We did not meet in December, so do I have a motion to approve those minutes?
So moved.
There's one
Second.
and a second. Mike and Larry, right?
Mm-hmm.
All right, and then the next is the financial statements, which we are gonna focus on the December preliminary financial statements. Todd?
All right, thank you.
Yep.
Happy New Year, everybody. Go through the
Thank you.
December financials. Always start out with the traffic. As you can see, we ended up the year slightly ahead of where we were in 2019. Barely ahead, but we were ahead. You can see that in 2019, our December traffic was better than, was our best kind of in this block here from 16 to 22. That's why it's marking green. And you see 2020 was our lowest one. So we're a little less than last year. We had a lot of cancellations toward the, in December, which kind of added to some of the drop off there. But again, you can see up there what's going on. Traffic driven by Allegiant. Legacy traffic, business travel is still behind. Next slide. This is kind of showing what we talked about already. Again, 912 and change, slightly ahead of 2019. So if you remember back in 2019, every month it was a new high. So it's nice to be talking about new highs now in 2023, hopefully. Next slide. Always compare ourselves to all airports. You can see our throughput, which is going through the checkpoint. What's going through the checkpoint is approximately the same as all airports. Our seats are down versus all airports, but relatively not too bad when you compare us compared to our peers, which is the next slide. You can see that our peer average, again, is for throughput is more consistent with what's going on with our legacy traffic. So they're down 24 and change, seats down almost 21%. And you can see our seats are better than what's going on with our peer average. We're second highest on the list behind White Plains. John, how are you?
It's not her.
And again, we talked about White Plains because they added in Breeze, and that's why they're at the top of the list there. Breeze, for those that don't know, is a LCC, a low-cost carrier. So it's sort of like an Allegiant. Next slide. Talk about the month of December. All things considered, good month. I mean, even though we came in below budget, should I say, we had less income than we budgeted. That is because we had $430,000 of CARES budgeted that we did not pull because, again, remember we have that money that we're pushing into 2023, and that was this November and December money, which is approximately $1 million, or 430. So with that 430, obviously we would have did better than we had budgeted. But you can see a lot of that is driven by our expenses were lower, and that's a lot of that is headcount. Next slide. Again, net revenues higher than budget. Always a good thing. You can't cut yourself to success. I always say that. It's really about revenue. But again, that's net revenue. That would be after cost of sales. So even with those increased costs of sales, we still surpass our budgeted number by well over $1 million. Expenses, again, we always talk about that head count. That's a big reason why those expenses are down. And depreciation is really a function of the timing of some of our projects. But overall, you can see that we ended up the year without CARES, call it $2.8 million, and we had an original budget of $2 million with CARES. So all things considered, that's pretty good. Next.
How much CARES money do we have in 2021?
2021?
Yeah.
2021 was approximately, I want to say about, they were all about 3 and a half, somewhere in that range. Last year, we had a budget, we budgeted about 3.8, 3.7. So we're about 2.7, where we ended up because we pushed $1 million back, and this year we're about, for 2023, about 4.1. Next slide. This is kind of comparing profit centers, really seeing where our money's coming from after expenses, overhead, and all those good things. You can see that parking is on top, CARES number 2, so that's really still driving a big part of our overall net income. But in 2021 and 2020, CARES was actually the number 1 item. So the fact that it's sliding down is a good thing. But you can see what's going on down there in airfield and terminal, and some of that is a reflection of our costs. Those are our biggest cost centers as far as cost. So as our costs go up, you usually see it in airfield and terminal, and you'll see that in the next slide when we talk about comparisons. And this is kind of comparing where we were. You know, you can see at the bottom there, net income, and this is all without CARES. Net income 3.4 million in 2022. You know, you can see it down here, 2 million without in 2021, and then you can see it in 2019. But look down there at 9 and 10, and you can see what's going on with some of the costs because of our costs going up so much, and why those cost centers are going up significantly. And in the terminal, you're also seeing because of the cost of the connector and some of those things coming into play. Next slide. Again, large budget variances. We always talk about why we had such a huge variance in our budgets. Good things because it was a positive thing. But again, we start out with revenue. Always a good thing when revenue is better than we budgeted. That's really driven by aviation services, excluding the icing, but that's a big part of that. Salaries, wages, that's again about that head count. Again, we budgeted full staffing for a full year, and the fact that we weren't there actually helped us out significantly. Parking revenue up, again, because of our traffic, better than expected versus our budget. And you can see down there that CARES is the money we pushed over into 2024. Next slide. And this is kind of breaking out those personnel costs. And you can see what's going on here. For the year, we're pretty close on non-personnel expenses, but the personnel cost, because of the head count, was favorable, which actually helped us out versus on expenses. Next slide. Through our cash, you can see down there what's going on. That one, number 10, and these are versus the changes. So anything marked in yellow is things that were changed versus actually November stuff, even though you didn't put it out at first November. But that service is really a reflection of the RACP timing, because we thought, you know, that connector money was really for those grants and holding on to that. We thought by now we would have gotten all that RACP money. We haven't. So it's good that we have that, but obviously it keeps pushing out, and hopefully at some point we'll get it in this decade. The connector financing, again, you see what's happening on that. We expected to get that sometime in late December. We ended up getting it in early January. That was that $2 million there. And then just some minor tweaks that we made on the PFCs, just based on what we're seeing early. PFCs, for people that know passenger facility charges, if you ever look at your ticket, everybody has one of them on there. It's $4.50 for on there, but that's based on when you actually place your ticket, not actually when you travel. So if you do your ticket 3 months early, that's kind of when we get the charge, not when you actually travel. Okay, next slide. And again, you see the big changes, some of that just based on some of the things we talked about. That's always going to be our biggest fluctuation as far as cash flow, as far as timing. It's going to be some of these capital items. Again, as we get to these last, I don't know, 4 or 5 months of connector stuff, you're gonna see we're kind of entering that final stretch where some of the timing could change from one month to the next. But overall, on a macro basis, it should be pretty close to what we estimated. But from month to month, you know, like I said earlier, it could come in at the end of one month versus the other one, and then you're talking a few $1 million, it could be pretty significant. Next slide. Let's kind of see, you see down there on 32, again, you're seeing, that was last year's number, so this is the last time we're gonna see that. That was the 59,000 that we had for cash on hand or our expenses for 2022. Our new number is 69,000, so going forward, you'll only see the 69,000, but you can see kind of what happened, and that number for January is lower than what we had in the original budget, but it kind of picks back up with some of the timings. And again, next slide. You can see that black line is kind of our, let's not go below there ever in life. That's the 60 days cash on hand, and that's after reserves and contingencies, and you can see we stay well above that as for foreseeable future. Any questions? Thank you.
Internet? Thank you, Todd.
Yep.
Any new business, old business? Yeah, I'm sorry.
I'll make a motion to accept the financial statement.
Thank you, Mike. We'll vote on this one too. We got a second?
Second.
Thank you, John. All in favor of accepting the report?
Aye.
Yeah, all right, okay, thank you. And vote on that. Right, now, is there any new business? Hearing none?
Go back and approve the minutes.
Oh, we had a quorum for that.
Oh, okay.
And then motion to adjourn.
So moved.
It's done. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, thanks. Yeah, thanks.
We have Justin here.
Justin is on the line.
Okay.
Was.
Justin, are you there?
I'm still here.
I'll see him on my screen. Oh, there he is, okay.
Everyone see me now?
Yeah.
All right, good. All right, we'll move right into this. So welcome to the Business Committee, January 26, 2023 of the LNAA. Can we get a roll call, please?
Justin Grimshaw,
Present.
Don Godshaw,
Present.
James Irwin,
Present.
Jeff Maskin, Glenn Reedman,
Present.
Chris Worley, Tara Zarinsky. We have a quorum.
Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, we'll start with the meeting minutes from November 22nd, 2022. I'd like to take a motion.
So moved.
Second. Second. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, nay. Aye as a sword. All right, Steve, you're up. We're going to start with the trash and recycling services contract.
Thank you, Justin. Good morning, everybody. This is our, looking to award a trash and single stream recycling contract to Republic Services of New Jersey from Allentown. 2-year contract. We, in December, we put out an RFP for a 2-year contract with 3 one-year optional extensions. So in the past, we've kind of done this as a 5-year contract, and looking at the, what Todd talks about, inflation and, all of the higher expenses, we decided a 2-year contract may make it a little more feasible to kind of readjust as we go through the next 5 years. We did have 4 proposals. I've listed them here: Whitetail from Perkiomenville, Waste Management, Republic Services, and JP Mascaro. Republic Services was the lowest bidder for a 2-year contract for $129,888. And then I did total up what the 5-year total would be if we went through each 1-year extension. So total of 5 years would be $343,286, and that's still $100,000 less than the nearest other bidder. We did run this through the solicitor, and they concurred that this Republic Services was the lowest responsible bidder. Just for comparison, our last 5-year award was for a total of 112,779. So, you know, the prices have gone up significantly. It is within budget. We actually, the first year this will be slightly over budget based on our estimates and what it actually came in. We budgeted increase of what, 19%, Karen, and it actually ends up being 28% more than what we even anticipated. So, with that being said, we recommend awarding the 2-year trash recycling services to Republic Services of New Jersey.
I have a question, Steve.
Sure.
Is there, when we sign these contracts, is there an out for us if they don't hold up? And the only reason I ask is not the one that is the recommendation, but another one on the list. I actually had to release them from my home because they didn't pick my garbage up a lot of the times. So like, so I know that does happen with some of these, some of these companies. So is there an out for us if they don't do their portion, if we sign a 2-year agreement?
Yes, we have some cancellation clauses if they're not performing.
Okay.
Typically, it's dumpster. We have 19 trash dumpsters and 14 recycle dumpsters. So it just ends up being, to your point, Justin, if they're not, if they're not performing, then we do have the out.
Okay, like I said, it's not the one you're recommending, but when I see the list, it brings back very horrible memories for me.
How much did the change in the recyclable market have in this contract increase?
I couldn't tell you as far as the availability of where they can dump recyclables. I couldn't tell you.
I have a question. So if this is a 2-year contract and you only signed a 5-year contract, but this bidder was significantly lower than the rest of the bidders, why wouldn't you try to sign a 5-year contract to get that lowest bid? Just because I don't perceive that costs are gonna go down.
And that's a great question. Part of the proposal was a fixed 2-year contract, and then they did provide pricing for the 1-year options for a total of 5 years.
Okay.
So it's not like we're not going into the 3, 4, and 5 years with an unknown price. They've actually given us the total. I totaled each year for the total of 5 years. So
Oh, okay, so they're not two different,
Right, it's just the authority's option.
It's the
at the end
authority's
of the
option.
end of 2 years to.
oh, okay, so that's
So we can
around.
renew if we still feel like that represents the best deal for us.
yes,
So would that go out to RFP after 2 years?
we may just
If we want to,
yeah.
we certainly could, based on the market conditions. I think that's what Steve was trying to say, rather than lock us in for 5, let's lock in for 2. And in year 3, we can decide if we want to continue as we are, or we can do another RFP.
Right, because that's your option. Okay.
Yeah, diesel fuel goes back to $1 a gallon. We may want to reconsider.
Yeah, good luck.
When you go back to the recyclable issue for a second, back in it was either late 18 or early 19, the Chinese market's a big market for recyclable product. They changed the standards by which they would accept recyclable materials had to be significantly cleaner. That made recyclable materials here worth significantly less. So I know this only because I was involved in this when Mace rebid their contract back in late 18 or early 19, and trash costs went up 40%. And it was entirely because the recyclables weren't worth what they were worth under the prior contract. So the amount of recyclable material we generate here, I would have to think that would be a significant component to the increase, plus diesel costs and everything else, but.
Well, we're supposed to be clean.
Uh,
China would,
You couldn't have mixed recyclables, you have certain plastics, they have to be separated out.
they all
Sig-
had clean.
Yeah,
Like, you couldn't have like residue
Yep.
and inside.
Yeah, if you throw your ranch dressing in the recycle bin and don't clean out the residuals.
yeah, exactly, so
Yeah,
that's
And it's-
significantly shifted trash costs.
That's one of our custodians are very cognizant of that, and they try and sort this as best they can, but
So you pre-sort here?
we try. I mean, when they're picking the garbage bags out of the cans, they're trying to make it as clean as we can.
Well, that's simple.
It's no. Is it tilting windmills?
Maybe, who knows?
Any other questions for Steve? Okay, I'd like to entertain a motion motion to, for Republic Services of New Jersey, of Allentown, whatever that, the exact words on them were, for the 2-year contract based on the pricing that we were just doing with the 3-year options.
So moved.
I'll second.
Second?
I'll second. Karen.
All in favor, signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, no. Ayes have the sword. All right, next one.
Justin, the from Allentown, is they're servicing our locations right here on, from Irving Street, their branch, right? So it's a local branch, they're not, you know.
Yeah, no, I saw that, I just, that piece came down when I was trying to spit all that out. I couldn't remember what exactly that. I knew I had Jersey, Allentown, all kinds of things, I just had to throw it all in there. The next thing will be a discussion item, for the capital projects update, and that will be Ryan.
Great, thanks, Justin.
Yeah.
Good morning, everybody. So, we'll go through typical updates, but I figured I'd hit on this as to why we're in this room today, the boardroom. Damage that happened over Christmas, actually on New Year's Eve, in fact, or
Christmas Eve.
Christmas Eve. So, basically what happened, for those of you who didn't hear, sprinkler pipe burst based on that cold snap that we had, the -10 wind chill. Kudos to Steve and his team who responded, came out on site. Once we determined what the issue was, the contractors came on site to do the connection in some of the open areas as part of the connector project. So basically that day, had a cleanup crew come in, got rid of all of the water, got rid of some of the waterlogged drywall, dried it out for about a week, and then we're coordinating with Bracey Construction, basically handling the repairs, handling the costs. As you can see, the repairs have actually started now. Sprinkler system took a while to find where the breaks were, because there are multiple breaks. That's back online as well. This also impacted areas of the connector project, so they were out making those repairs as well. But again, the way we're looking, scheduled to be back in the boardroom for February, so that's still the goal. Again, most of the repairs were drywall, ceiling tile, you can kind of see, really came in the entrance part, didn't really go further down, which actually helped us out a lot. So more to come on that, but just wanted to update Going into our project status with the runway, obviously we're in winter shutdown. Next year, the big areas are the areas in pink or red, depending on what it looks like, with some of the center line lighting, the grading, and then we'll get into a little bit the Alpha 3 taxiway golf relocation. This one we talked about last year, package 1. Closeout's been submitted, there's really no more work, we're just waiting on a number from the FAA, from the Tech Ops group for the reimbursable agreement to fully close. So we'll keep it on here because we're waiting money back from the FAA. Package 2, all the work was done last year, we're really working on reconciling our quantities and numbers, and again, that closeout package probably submitted next month to get that process rolling with the FAA as well. Package 3, similar right behind package 2, addressing some administration punch list items. Once that's complete, we'll go through closeout as well over the next few months. Again, the biggest thing with this is just getting our final 10% of the grant fund. Package 4, again, winter shutdown till about April. The biggest thing next year, you see on the left, is the relocation of Alpha 3. The new pavement, which is going to be called Taxiway Golf, is on the left-hand side. So we're actually coordinating now with operations and the airlines about phasing of that so it doesn't impact our air carriers in terms of what areas they can work in. So we're actually looking at some alternate taxi routes to maximize construction areas so they can get in, do the work, and get out. Package 5, if you recall, is the shoulder work for the runway. Again, that's slated to begin in the spring as well. Really working on the submittals and the construction schedule. Again, coordinating operations and the airlines in terms of timing, what work can and can't be done. Because even though they're not working on the runway, obviously the runway isn't usable because of the work they're doing in the shoulder. So coordinating a lot of that just to make sure everyone's on the same page when we're starting, when we're stopping, and then those night durations as well. Moving on to the next two new projects from last update. Again, to recall, it was in our capital budget, which we got approved last November with this contract as well, renovating Hangar 7's restrooms. 100-day construction duration, so that should be wrapped up by May. I'll go through some photos here in a minute, but put up a temporary restroom out there. They actually had some abatement that was required on some of the old piping insulation that has asbestos on them, so that has all been taken care of. And you'll see the demolition is well underway out there. So again, you see temporary restroom that we put in, some of the areas that we're basically setting up to partition. So, again, that's the temporary partition. You walk in, so we tried to eliminate how far it went out as best we could to, again, reduce the impacts on the passengers coming through there. And that's kind of where we are today. As part of this, if you may recall, I may or may not have mentioned it before, but in order to meet ADA requirements, we actually had to enlarge the bathrooms. So one of the offices was basically being connected to the bathroom. So this is actually the old office, the bathroom, the wall's gone. And then they're actually recreating an office where the former snooze room was that wasn't really used as a snooze room. So you can actually see this far right, it's from the corner of the office looking down. So they've gotten rid of a lot of the material already. And then that's the snooze room that's going to be converted to an office, so they're working through that at the same time as well. Moving on, I know we mentioned a lot in the budget, and Todd mentioned some of the variances in terms of building demolition and some of the ARPA COVID relief grants. So while it's not a capital project, because it's an operating expense, it's still something that we've really talked about doing for a while now, just because of the safety and security and some of the components. So if you may recall, we got some of it approved last year with the homes basically on Race Street. So all 9 of those residential properties have been demolished, site's been graded, going to come back in the spring to do the final grading and seeding. And then they've actually started on the former Tape Works building on Weaversville Road. I'll show some pictures here. So that's where the former properties were, behind the maintenance shop. Again, just kind of sitting there with a lot of the trees and brush. And then, again, the site now, all the buildings are gone. Again, just cleaning up some of the trees. And actually, the contractor we're working with has been doing a really great job at getting some of the other trees that are around our fence line that are good for operational components, just to have it clear. Again, as I mentioned, Tape Works, they actually started earlier this month. The building's already down. They're just doing some of the site cleanup. And actually helping us, you kind of see some of the trees back here that have actually been flagged as obstructions for quite some time with the FA and PennDOT. So we're working on those as well while they're in that site. Moving on to Queen City. The 1533 design, again, as we talked about, the biggest thing now, the pavement has been designed. We're working on the lighting design package, so the new electrical vault the team is designing, and then replacing all of the runway edge lighting that we're trying to get a grant for this year. So we're progressing on that as well. Been coordinating with the contractor to start this project in the spring of this year. Again, rehabilitating runway 1533. Once we know more about timing, coordinating with again operations down there as well as the tenants, just to let them know about the closure and the timing. So we're working on the submittal so they can get that started in the spring as well. So we're looking forward to that. And moving on to Braden Air Park, this project we talked about before is really the final piece was the awning. You see there they were putting in. So that project has been completed, which we're excited about. Coordinating with Colin and some other folks about holding an open house, really to come see the space and obviously see what was done for the tenants down there and the community to use the facility. But right now, again, all of our costs have been paid, our grant's been reimbursed. So from our standpoint, the project's been completed, which again, I think is a good thing we got to this point. Again, as we always do, the update with our summary, updated what we've spent to date, some of the grant amounts that I'll get into with the connector. But you can see we're in pretty good shape with our contingency and what we've been doing, as well as the progress, 100% completion for each. So any questions on those before moving to the connector?
Hearing none. Thank you, Ryan.
Thanks, Justin. All right, so I'll roll into the connector update. All right, so a lot to go over since we only met in November, last 2 months. There's been a lot of progress. Back in November, we were about 65% complete. We're now 75.5. Really, you can see what's been completed, a lot of the work in the connector, above ceiling work, sprinkler piping and testing, as well as the repairs that were required from the water damage we talked about. The elevators and escalators are actually in the connector space, and actually working on some of the drywall, prime coat. And you can see some of the work we're doing that you actually see in the photos, continuing with the exterior metal panel installation, vertical circulation electrical, and actually working on putting in the vertical circulation escalators and elevators here in the next month as well as working on the terrazzo as part of that.
Did flooding add anything to the timeline, or can we absorb it?
I think we can absorb it. It did add some time. The biggest impact was actually the terrazzo, just because of some of the area they had to do. Some of the material that was on site actually froze, so that was something they had to replace.
Okay.
But I think we'll kind of get into the schedule later. That's part of something the team's been doing, as we've done from the beginning, to really, eliminate the loss of this. So going through some of the look aheads, you'll see, and we'll talk about timing. Window installation is the biggest one. Obviously, you can't complete the space without windows. The interior finishing, a lot of the exterior metal panels have gone up, and then actually get into a little bit coordinating with TSA and some nuances we've had to deal with from their standpoint. So we'll just kind of run through some of these photos quick. Here's, the outside, seeing some of the panels there as well. I forgot to mention that, but most of you know, bathrooms have been completed. There's a couple minor items, a punch list that we're addressing, and actually some of the final signage that we're working on, but overall, it was turned out really well with some of the back and forth we did with the contractors, revising the design a little bit to maximize the space, but overall, we're happy to see those up and running again. Again, as I mentioned, escalators went in back in December, you can see there. So the left one and then the right one, and they're just kind of working on some finishing touches of that right now. Again, this is vertical circulation core. On the left is if you were arriving passenger going down into the tunnel, and the one on the right is actually at the bottom looking up. So it's a pretty impressive space that they're starting to outfit. And since this picture, they've actually put drywall insulation on both sides of there, so they're actually moving pretty quickly there as well. Again, this is down in the tunnel. If you come down, basically the stairs here make a left. Back this corner is where the elevators are going to be, or where people will come out and make the turn into the tunnel. So finishing that space as well. Again, this is when they were starting the terrazzo in the, will be the queue area. So they did do some of that area that's now protected, and then we'll move on further in the space when they do that. There's the terrazzo. Again, here's a couple shots of the ceiling grid. Again, even since these from last week, we keep going, so that's these. They've actually added a lot of ceiling tiles, but you can see the space set up.
It's maybe a stupid question, but I've never seen purple drywall.
It's the water resistant
Okay.
drywall.
I always thought that was green.
It can be either.
Okay.
Yeah, green or, depending on the.
Gotcha, thank you.
Yep, that's good. So the elevators in the connector, the finishes have been incorporated, and they're working through the controls and some of the other items there. Again, as we've talked about some of the phasing, really working through phase one, what we originally had as part of the construction. Really where we are to date, I mentioned back in November, we're about 66%. You can see what we've done. Maybe next month we'll take off some of the 100% just to make it a little cleaner, but actually the elevators, escalators weren't even on last time, and they're about 50% because half of them are in with the connector. Again, phase two, some of these components, some of the outside work, elevators and escalators in the vertical circulation, and obviously commissioning the security checkpoint from the vertical circulation core is a big part of what we're doing. And then phase three is really once everything is up and running, working through the tunnel renovations while this area, which is the vertical circulation, is up and running. So we're using that space, but then coordinating off to the side, doing the tunnel work to get the secure exit portals and some of those items, so we don't have somebody standing at the backflow area. So really where we are here, the biggest change From the funding side was getting notification about the community project funds, the 600,000. So thanks, Colin, for your help with that. So now that actually takes us, we had put that on there as a tentative, but now that takes us to 18.9 in funding. 95% of the grant eligible costs are under grant, which again is a great win for us for what we've been doing. You can see updated it on the bottom where we are with what the contractor spends have been. But I mentioned before earlier, in terms of schedule, this project, unlike a lot of others in the country, is not immune from supply chain issues and delays from suppliers and other components. Because of what we've actually been doing to compress the schedule, as we've talked about a lot, it's actually kept us on schedule with some of these hiccups. I mean, the water damage is one. The biggest one is actually the windows. And as you recall, we have the dynamic glass, so it's a little bit more complex than just your simple standard glass. So we had some timing issues of getting it here, but those should actually arrive next month, get installed, so it'll be in March. Exterior metal, insulated metal panels, there were some issues there about getting them on site. I believe 95% or so of them are on site, but they're continuing with that as well. The other piece I mentioned with TSA, as you recall, we've been talking with them bi-weekly as we get closer to finishing this. They actually notified us earlier this month that the window that we were trying to get the equipment here between, I think it's mid-February and mid-April, they have a new contractor that they're using to install the equipment. So even if we were ready as we were projecting to have the space ready, they weren't coming to install the equipment. So that's one piece we've actually been coordinating with, which I think, again, given what we're dealing with the windows and some of the other pieces, we're able to kind of work around that to still give us the time frame that we originally intended of June to really occupy the checkpoint, the vertical circulation. And again, you see some of the other pieces in there, the terrazzo, the site restoration, some of the other components of the site. The other piece I'll mention with the escalators, because of what we did in the beginning to save time regarding phasing, the original plan was to take the escalators down the tunnel through where we have the security checkpoint now to bring them into the space in the vertical circulation. Well, because we were moving the timing of the tunnel later, what we're doing now in the project, the manufacturer, the team, the structural engineers have actually had to work to really come up with a way to bring them through the opening that you see in the vertical circulation over that 30-foot height span and put them in place. So it's required a little bit more engineering and confirmation, but that actually should be wrapped up here in the next week or two to obviously get those in place and to continue get that moving. So again, we're still progressing, still making adjustments as we can, but again, it's working through some of the material deliveries. That the biggest thing, being the windows, some of the cladding around the elevators, but more to come in terms of how those are working as we're making those adjustments. But overall, still, as I mentioned, progressing. Given some of the material challenges, and we still, I think I mentioned before, the switch gear, which powers a lot of the space, we ordered, I think, a month after we signed the contract. It's supposed to be here this month, but we still don't have a delivery date. So that's another thing that, again, from what we did a year and a half ago, has really saved us now. But more to come on that once that gets here. Any questions on that?
It's good.
After the project.
Good.
And we're still with TSA, we're still looking at 3 security lanes, and we've got room for 4, so that hasn't changed.
Correct. Yeah, the biggest thing we're actually doing now, coordinating with them, is some of the signage. I know Colin, Tom, and Glenn with some of our digital equipment as part of what TSA shows and that procedure. So working through that as well in the meantime.
And we're confident they're not going to delay the installation any further than what they're talking about.
Not from what we know at this point. What we've also mentioned is, depending, even if their installers aren't ready, getting the equipment here, storing it here, or storing it in some other offsite facility so it's ready when they're ready. So we're kind of working through some of those items as well, again, just to maximize that efficiency.
All right, any other questions for Ryan? Thank you, Ryan.
Yep, thank you.
Any new business? Hearing none, we'll move on. I'll take a motion to adjourn.
I'll make a motion.
Second. Anybody? Motion. Thank you. All right.
I'm not on the committee, I can't.
No, you can. It's okay.
I guess he didn't.
Yeah, Glenn actually did, Justin.
Yeah, it's okay.
All right, cool. I didn't hear. Perfect. All right, meeting adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you, Justin.
Okay, does anyone have a need for a couple of minute break before we roll into exec, or just roll tide?
Roll Tide.
Roll tide. Can't stand this on. We're gonna start with Go Birds. Go Birds. I'll zoom in. Go Birds.
Yeah.
Let's
Put 'em on
start with I'll be
WIP.
here on Sunday.
Oh, you're gonna be?
You got it now.
Oh, you're a lucky man. Okay, we will go ahead then and call the January 26, 2023 meeting of the Lehigh Northampton Airport Authority Executive Committee to order. So, could you call the roll, please?
John Hayes,
Here.
Glenn Reedman,
Present.
Justin Grimshaw,
Present.
Mike Stershik,
Here.
Tara Zrinsky,
Here.
Matt Turk. There, Juan.
Okay, we'll excuse Matt today. He has his State of the City presentation starting in an hour and a half, I guess.
Yes.
So we'll wish him luck in that regard. Do we have any public comment today?
No, sir.
Okay. Next are the action items. First on the list is approval of the meeting minutes from November 22nd, 2022. I'd entertain a motion.
So moved.
Motion by Glenn, second by Tara. Any additions, deletions, or corrections to the minutes? Hearing none, all those in favor of the subject motion indicate by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries. Next is approval of the Florio Perucci invoices for November and December. They were posted on Novus agenda previously. Entertain a motion to approve.
So moved.
Motion by Glenn, second by Justin. We'll give him that one. Do we have any discussion on the invoices? It's happy to see the number of legal matters that we have going on at this point is shrinking, which is a good thing. Kate, well,
Yeah, always good.
Always good.
Not good
you
for
don't
the
know
firm.
this. I have 4 lawyers in my family.
It's not good for Cody's firm. I get it.
Okay.
I understand.
Okay, we have a motion on the floor and a second. All those in favor of the subject motion indicate by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries. Okay, Colin, you are up with a public and government relations update. We're hearing this, we've got a lot going on in the governmental arena, for lack of a better term.
Yeah, certainly, and I always appreciate the opportunity to talk to the board about government relations as well as community engagement. There's really a sense for us to kind of set the scene for what we're going to look at in 2023. We've been so focused over the last couple of years, as you've seen on the connector, that we've shifted gears a tad, and now we're at the point where the messaging and what we're speaking to legislators about is changing. So I just wanted to quickly go over some of the things I referenced in the last presentation I had, where we stand, and then also talk about some community engagement. So we actually did a presentation at Northampton County's Finance Committee doing an airport system update. Very positive. I know Tara was on the call and Mr. Heckman oversaw the meeting. So we do this every year. We go before Northampton and Lehigh. Some of the questions and follow-up questions that were asked, they asked about our 2020 bond reissue, which Todd certainly addressed, and what the result of that was and how positive it was for the authority to do that during the pandemic. Staffing challenges, Real ID, the movement into 2025, and the resurgence of corporate and general aviation. We talk so much about passenger traffic. Like this was an opportunity to actually talk a little bit about GA and corporate as well. So just to see if the rebound was happening. I know we just had open Hangar 11, and that is now full. So really giving them an overall look at what's going on in the aviation system for the LNAA. So this was Northampton County. We'll go before Lehigh County on March the 22nd. So that'll be our next airport system update. But this is always good. It's a good communication tool to keep everybody informed of where we are.
I recommend any member of the Board of Governors that can make those meetings, make them show support for the management team, and I know the commissioners and council people like to see it.
Yeah, absolutely. So federal funding, Ryan talked a little bit about it. This was kind of the last piece of the puzzle. Was the community project funding. Congresswoman Susan Wild played a big role in us obtaining that funding. $600,000, no local match. And really what we're talking about are these devices right here, which is those security choppers that'll be at the end of the bridge in order to stop people from coming back into the bridge area and into the checkpoint. Also, the exit portal doors downstairs, which will alleviate having the TSA secure that area as well. You'll walk through, and the doors will shut behind you. You've seen them in most major airports, so we're going to have them down here, and it's really going to be a nice addition. So if we move forward here and you look forward to the next slide, Sylvette, here it was. I mean, this was really the layout when we went into the TSA checkpoint terminal connector. How do we get the funding? Because obviously we couldn't pay for it all. I got the charge from Todd and Tom, and we went and we went through a lot of different funding mechanisms and resources. The airport terminal program was $5 million. We got the $600,000 from community project funding. RACP was $4 million. Bureau of Aviation over $7 million. We have PennDOT multimodal, and of course the ACE grant, $18.9 million and 95%. Almost a full, but we are where we need to be. So certainly mission accomplished, and we can move forward on the project. But now we move to a different stage, and this has really been the focus of where we're going now, which is the non-aeronautical development, and really from a perspective of the airport, creating an airport city, I guess you could say. So how do you do that? And obviously we've talked about hotel development and these sites right here on the frontage of the airport, beachfront property, as Tom likes to talk about when we're talking to legislators, moving the entrance possibly down further. It happened this morning. I think, Steve, you and I were driving in and someone shot across 2 lanes because they missed the parking lot. You know, people make that left-hand turn, and within seconds they have to decide, where am I going? What am I doing here? Moving this entrance down creates sort of that lead, that long lead into an airport, which you see in a lot of airports, decision making. And if you can add some different elements here, certainly it helps. Now, obviously the parking areas here, one of them is being used for the overflow parking, so what do? So obviously we talked about a parking structure, and maybe that's the way to go. We're having these conversations with legislators because we want to create the vision. As you know, walking in and just saying, I need some funding, for what? What are we talking about? So creating that visual look for them, and I will tell you that speaking to several of them, when they got to see the site and really see the overview, they got excited because they're like, okay, what can we put here? You know, what are some of the elements that can benefit the valley, not just the airport? So this is what we've been showing, and if you move forward to the next slide, Sylvette, we did submit for some state funding, DCD multimodal. Now, we all know what's going on in Harrisburg right now, and they are not going to be back at least until after the special elections on February 7th. There was a large contingent at the chamber event the other day, so they are around and they are talking to, obviously, constituents and organizations and businesses. So we spent some time talking to our House and Senate members to remind them that we have submitted this application. It's for $3 million, that's the max. Typically you don't get the $3 million, but we always want to make sure that they understand the critical point of this. And this is really for the phasing of that project. So if you think about it, if we put in that site 1 was a hotel or some other sort of project, you have to make some entrance there because we haven't moved our entrance yet. So coming in, you have that toll booth that's still in the way for having some traffic go through there. So some improved lighting, improving the pavement, because obviously that pavement is not meant to have a lot of heavy traffic like it could have if we put some businesses or some other elements back there. So we've submitted for this. We've had great conversations about it. My understanding from talking to everybody is at earliest March. They'll have a meeting about this for community and economic development, and earliest stage would be March for this funding to be awarded. So we'll keep you posted on that application. PennDOT multimodal, obviously change of administration, change with everything. You know, our typical contacts here at the PennDOT have changed. So PennDOT Secretary-elect Mike Carroll, familiar with him actually from the Wilkes-Barre-Scranton area where I used to work. He was actually down here at the airport during an airport tour. We invited the Northeast delegation to come down a while ago to kind of show them. So having him in this position, he understands. Will it benefit? Nobody ever knows, but he knows the airport and he knows what we're looking to do. So that's fantastic. So we put in for a $3 million grant for PennDOT multimodal. This process will be ongoing a little bit, so we'll keep everybody updated. This is, again, for the creation of some CAD-ready sites in those areas, and also some extra infrastructure work that we would need in order to support that. The last piece of, and we've talked a lot about this over the last couple of months, is the Airport Land Development Zone that was passed, which will help us when it comes to the Majestic property, as well as projects on the airport. If we expanded cargo, if we expanded some other resources that we needed here. This is the $2,100 tax credit per net new job, created for a maximum of 10 years. There's two parts to this process. There's the designation of 300 acres that we could have here at a commercial airport, and there's 50 acres for smaller, more general aviation airports. And then there's the actual application process. So we're not at the application process, Majestic is not at the application process, it's not there yet. But the designation process, we want to make sure we secure our 300 acres. So we've been working with Majestic, we've been working internally with Ryan and Steve and everybody to talk about, and Tom to talk about the areas in which we want to designate that 300 acres. Because once you kind of put it there, you can make some adjustments, but we want to make sure that it's outlined in the proper way. So we are actually submitting the designation. We've had some good conversations with DCED because this is a new program for them. So having those conversations just before the holiday really, Tom, I don't know if you want to add to that, really helped us kind of come up with what they need in order to make sure this process is smooth. So 30 to 60 days, I think, review. So once we submit it, probably March, April timeframe, we'll know. I think that's it for the government. Does anybody have any questions?
Do you have any questions or comments for Colin?
So quickly on community engagement, I know there was a funny article in the paper from the morning call, which we commented on. Nobody ever wants a 0 on a test, but we'll take this 0. This is the firearms caught at TSA checkpoints. And the reason I actually put this in the presentation was because consistently in the past, you can see ours is blue. We're not immune to it. And there are times where you've seen in 2019, 2020, 21, the escalation. And there's been questions, what do we do from a perspective of an airport to help mitigate this? So proper signage, we've worked with TSA, they've come in, Lisa Farbstein, their public affairs, we've talked to her about coming in, and she has how to properly travel with a firearm. As the article said, some of it's common sense, but some of it, and I was having a discussion with Tom, was when you think about this time frame right here, there was the pandemic. So you had a lot of travel, so people were and then all of a sudden, travel stopped. So getting back to travel was certainly something that took some time. The other piece to this, and Tom brought it up when I was having a discussion with him, is the new travelers. There was a lot of new travelers coming out of the pandemic, people that hadn't flown before, hadn't flown in a long time. And some of it is hey, look, you've been shut in your house for 3 months, and I haven't seen the aunt, the uncle, the family member, and maybe that changed your perspective. I want to fly now. Well, flying and properly going with a firearm, there's a process to it. And we've spent a lot of time working with TSA, and we've been, Alicia, you could say fortunate, but also, lucky to have 2022 0. So that's really, really good that we didn't have any firearms go through the TSA checkpoint. Great job by TSA as well. TSA pre-check,
Actually, if I could go back to that for
Yeah.
a second. That's actually running contrary to nationwide numbers. Tom and I talked about this right before the article came out. You look nationwide, we had 10 years ago, 1,800 guns caught, TSA checkpoints nationwide. 2022, I think it was 6,500-ish.
Yeah.
So contrary to the trend, which is good to see.
and with our traffic rising again.
Yeah.
So more people going through. So that's actually a good thing to Mr. Hayes' point. So TSA pre-check, the reduction in price I wanted to point out. So if you do a TSA pre-check, it was $85 for 5 years, it's now $78. This has been a very popular program that we have run here. We registered about 11,000 people over the time that we hosted TSA pre-check, and that's when we put our TSA pre-check lane in. With the new checkpoint coming in, more lanes, potential for longer times of having that TSA pre-check lane. TSA pre-check is something that really benefits a lot of passengers, but also the TSA really wants people to be signing up for TSA pre-check for the reduction, right? So they keep pushing this. So we're actually having 3 events this year, and the 3 events that are scheduled right now are all RV. So they'll be parked out in the parking lot. No one has to come into the airport. Literally, it's pulling in the parking lot, hopping in, doing your registration, and out you go. So it's very convenient for everyone. Our props program is actually an employee recognition program that we have going on, that we've had going on, and we actually had 80 nominations for the program and 23 recipients. You have a celebration luncheon actually scheduled for tomorrow, And what I like really about this program is that it's very much the public. You know, typically we've had some programs in the past where it's been internal. This is a lot of submissions from airlines, our fire department who did a great job, you know, our staff that are getting people that we serve submitting their names. And it's not an easy process. The process is you have to go on the website and fill out a form. Not to say it's not easy, it's just you go that extra step, which I think is really something that's great to see. The response from the public, and people always ask, well, how do you know you're having great service here? You're seeing it and you're hearing it from the passengers, which is great. So we'll have a nice luncheon tomorrow over at Gate 2 in order to recognize our staff. And the last thing I wanted to talk about was fear of flying. This actually came back after the pandemic. We weren't able to do it simply because of protocols. Fear of flying is a popular program for us. We had people asking about it during the pandemic, and we couldn't do it. But now that we brought it back, we've already had 2 sessions now, and you can see one of the elements that the Allegiant base has given us is this. For the longest time, we were unable to get on the aircraft. So you know, licensed therapist that does a course session, okay, in classroom. Then we had a commercial airline pilot and a TSA representative, and they did the tour of the checkpoint, all those high pressure areas. But they did a lot of the methods and ways of kind of reducing that anxiety and stress within the classroom. With the addition of Allegiant having their base here and having aircraft returning at night, now the aircraft is here, so this goes from 6 to 8, we work with Allegiant. This has been so well received that it continues to grow, because they're able to take what is being said in the classroom and actually go into an aircraft. And again, some individuals may not overcome that, but some just being able to be in there and having a pilot come and explain the noises, explain the environment, explain what you're going to hear within that aircraft is very beneficial. So we'll continue to have these. We're looking to have these 3 times a year right now. So we had one in January, the next one's coming in May. And you know, again, we push this out on social media and our website as well. And that's it. I don't know if anybody else has any questions.
Hi, Larry Hamburger. I did have a quick question for you.
Sure, Larry.
When we confiscate a weapon at the airport, obviously these people, for the most part, forgot they had it in their suitcase, or they have some reason why they have the weapon with them. What do we do with these people? I mean, they're not criminals, they're just doing something they shouldn't
You mean
do.
the process?
Yeah.
Well, unfortunately, as I've said to many reporters, because they keep calling for the comment, they want us to give us, it's a costly mistake. When you're going through the airport and you get to the checkpoint, that's federal land. So there's nothing Tom Stout, Steve Connors from the Operations Safety and Executive is going to be able to do at that juncture, because now you're in that federal checkpoint. So unfortunately, Larry, it starts with them being arrested at the checkpoint, which is never good. The weapon is certainly confiscated, depending on whether or not they have a permit to carry or not, which again doesn't really matter when you're going through the checkpoint in that realm, which is why we try to push on how to properly travel. And then, you know, mostly from our perspective, it can be summary offense from our police department. The problem is that the TSA has their own punishment for that, and that fine is in the thousands of dollars. And I once asked the police chief here at the LNAA, you know, if there was any grace, and he said it's not if you're going to get the fine, it's when you're going to get the fine. So really, you're going to pay, and it's significant. It is not a small, you know, it's not a small number. So Larry, you know, we try to get this out as much as possible because, you know, again, and it happens quite frequently. It is a mistake. It's, you know, people come in and you know, they always say that their eyes light up, and it's just, oh my gosh, I forgot, you know. But at the end of the day, there's some legal to it, and there's also some.
And they're not going on their flight.
And they're not going on their flight.
Yep.
Yeah, and they're missing their flight. So the monetary piece of it too. So there's some elements to it. So it's very important to get that messaging out there. And you would think over time, as people would, but
I break down it, I know where all my firearms are at all times, they're secure, I don't forget it's in a backpack.
Yeah.
But that's
Thanks, John.
But that's me. So. How long does the checkpoint shut down when something like this happens? How long does it typically take to clear the issue?
Yeah, it's typically the response time for our officers to secure the firearm and move it clear of the checkpoint, so.
It just creates stressful time, I mean, that whole thing, especially if you do it in a morning time when we got a ton of people going through the checkpoint, everybody.
Yep.
So if it's in a bag, at that point, it's beyond the person's, so TSA has taken possession of it in a bag.
Mm-hmm.
If it's on a person, like they forget and they're carrying it on their hip, because
Forget.
that's happened before, where folks have actually tried to have it on their hip and forgot they had it.
You know, like, 'cause it's just.
That's a different protocol, because now you have to.
So
Yeah,
it's
it's
there,
something
yeah, forget about it.
Yep.
Okay, it's awesome.
Anyone else have any questions? Colin, thank you, good work.
Thanks.
Appreciate it very much. Okay, do we have any new business to come before the committee? Any needs for the exec session?
From staff, I don't know if the solicitor's office has anything for exec session.
No, I don't think so. Do we have any updates on stormwater? Do we need to go into
Nothing
nothing?
new that I'm
Okay,
aware of.
I think that's the only pending that there might have been. Okay, with that, entertain a motion to adjourn. With that, with Tara, we're good. Okay, thanks everyone, appreciate it, and go Birds.
Okay.